Hello everyone, and welcome to my pop culture hot take of the month. So, uh, if you watched my video from last month, you will know that this is a series of videos that I was doing over on my Patreon, but I have decided to move them over here to my YouTube for all to enjoy, question mark. As I am doing a completely different series over on my Patreon, which is much spicier hot takes, if you can believe it. But anyway, with these pop culture hot takes, I am going back into my live journals, and I am reading some of the stuff that I had written back in the day, and I am taking a look at it again and adding more commentary and also giving myself some self-critique, as it were. So let's see. The one for this month, as will probably also happen more than once on this channel, because I really do like throwing shade at Disney, especially in recent years. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Disney, I've always been a fan, but priorities have shifted due to morals and ethics that they hold, and morals and ethics that I hold. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Disney was founded on capitalism. So, that's the foundational base of it. And because we are living in a late stage capitalism society, that pillar won't be able to hold for very much longer unless something drastically changes within their core beliefs and values and morals. So, I don't think we'll necessarily see the collapse of Disney anytime soon, but perhaps in our lifetime, if they don't do something beautiful and wholesome. But anyway, so I am taking a look at something that I had written back on November 25th, 2014. There's a few 2014s in these hot takes so far. And this was 7 Disney princess stereotypes the new Cinderella needs to fix. Now, the little rant that I had gone on was based off of the article that this was referencing here. So this was, when was this particular thing published? Let's see. It was by Refinery29 on November 19th, 2014. And this was, oh god, I believe the start of our Disney live action remakes. And while, I do think the visuals of that particular remake are stunning, the costumes are beautiful and all the décolletage is lovely, we have Ever After at home, thank you very much. So I don't really need a Disney remake of Cinderella that has a lot of similar beats to Ever After. So no thanks, Disney. I already have this movie and it's perfect. So why would I need anything else? But anyway, this was written by Lauren Levine, and she had said, with a wave of a wand, the trailer for Disney's new live-action version of Cinderella was unleashed on the internet today. As we already noted, it looks pretty good. You really can't go wrong with Cate Blanchett playing the evil stepmother, or Downton Abbey's Lily James as the titular character. Add in Helena Bonham Carter as Ella's fairy godmother, and you've got a trifecta of strong females rounding out the leads. Also, the King of the North himself, Robb Stark, Richard Madden, has been shaved within an inch of his facial hair's life to play Prince Charming. It looks like the two even have a few meet-cutes besides the ones at the ball, so we're already making some progress on the 1950 animated tale. Who dives into marriage after a few whirls around the dance floor anyway? It's not that Disney's original Cinderella wasn't a classic and a staple of our childhood viewing repertoire. It's just that, well, Disney princesses can be a bit problematic in terms of character development and storylines. They're usually damsels in distress in need of a prince to rescue them. Most of Disney's female protagonists don't even have any character traits beyond their beauty and virtue. There's a real opportunity for this adaptation to make some strides away from the tired tropes and stereotypes in which many classic Disney princesses are mired. Ever After made a few steps in the female empowerment direction, but the film wasn't made by Disney. Here are just a few glass slippers and ceilings we hope to see broken in the Mouse House's new adaptation, and any other remakes of classic Disney princess films going forward. Oh God, we'll stick a pin in that one. And it says under here, our heroine has no friends, save for supernatural ones. Jesus Christ. Okay. Would it kill Disney to give Cinderella, Snow White, and other lonely ladies someone to talk to besides forest creatures and fairy godmothers? Let's have some actual chemistry between Cinderella and the prince. Prince Charming is supposedly head over heels in love with Cinderella after meeting and dancing with her. So why does he need to see if a shoe fits to determine if she is the one? Their relationship can be based on mutual attraction sprung from a waltz, sure, but also on conversations and shared interests, like riding horses through glorious meadows. Besides, does he really not recognize his true love out of her ball gown and covered in some dirt? This is troubling. One's outer trappings are on par with what's inside. No one will acknowledge Cinderella as someone worthy of a prince until the cinders are washed from her face and she's dressed in a gorgeous gown. And, continuing down that disappointing route, Ariel has to give up her voice and her mermaidhood to finally meet up with Eric. Aren't we repeatedly told that it's what's inside that counts? Nice dresses are great and all, but what makes Cinderella more appealing to the prince than the other ladies in the land is her personality and charisma. And does Prince Eric really want his love to be mute and unable to see her family? Only magic can change your destiny. Jasmine only meets Aladdin thanks to the help of a genie sprung from a magic lamp. Disney's version of Cinderella is based on Cinderella, a French tale written by Charles Perrault in the 17th century. A moral of Perrault's story is that if one has intelligence, common sense, and courage, she still may not achieve success without the aid of a magical figure like a fairy godmother. Let's give Cinderella a little more credit here. By having her meet the prince both in her fantasy gown and regular city clothes, director Sir Kenneth Branagh can help knock down the whole Deus Ex Machina premise. Oh God, I didn't realize that that film was directed by Kenneth Branagh. Okay, stick a pin in that one too. She's just waiting for her prince. Rapunzel sat in her tower waiting for a prince to rescue her, so that her life could truly begin. Luckily, the new Cinderella isn't just sitting around pining away for a man to come rescue her from her callous stepmother and stepsisters. We've given it a contemporary feel that is human and humane, and strangely enough, not built around the idea that Cinderella's life depends on finding a man or things, like clothes or a title, or just hoping this magic will come along. Branagh explained to E. It's much more about who she is, what she feels about herself, and taking that kind of sort of spiritual cue to make it refreshing in a contemporary way. And that's all for this article. Now, let's go read the little rant that I had here back in 2014. So I said, good article, but there were some interesting flaws, although the line about just around the river bend was pretty hilarious. What part was that in? Did I miss that? Hold on. I don't see it. I do not see it. Anyway, so however, there were just some untrue statements made about the princesses, which leads me to think that the author of this article didn't do their research or blatantly ignores hidden subtext. Also, I think she's forgetting the part where it's a freaking fairy tale. If she wants an example of a few whirls around the dance floor, people in Victorian England were always getting married super fast because the chances of their spouses dying was very high back then. And in the original fairy tale, Cinderella's stepsisters were quite beautiful. And Cinderella was kind of scruffy, but she cleaned up really nicely, and she was smart, as well as kind. So, yes, identifying her after the ball would have been very difficult. Also, forest animals aren't supernatural creatures. Eric knew that Ariel was a mute, and it was obvious that she had a huge personality on screen. He also had no idea she was a mermaid, and if it was anything but a Disney film, he most likely would have been repulsed by her in that form. As for Rapunzel, Flynn Rider just happened upon her tower, and she forced him to take her outside. That's not waiting for a prince so that her life could begin. It's a teenager who uses a guy to get what she wants, which is more woman empowerment than she thinks. And I like singing princesses. Okay, I'm done. It's a rant kind of day. Okay, so clearly I have a lot more to add, and a lot more things to critique myself on. So first and foremost, it's not necessarily untrue that people in Victorian England were getting married super early because their spouses were dying. I mean, the child bed death rate was a huge problem back in Victorian England, or I should say the child mortality rate was high. But yeah, even the death of the mother, was also something that was very high as well. And I mean, Victorian England had a lot of problems. Cinderella, I guess, maybe is kind of scruffy, in the original. I need to go back and read the original. I don't believe I have gotten to that in my fairy tale readings as of yet. But she was incredibly smart. And I do believe, depending on the version of Cinderella, an argument could be made that the prince had a hard time identifying her because of the magic, and also he only saw her once, and maybe the prince wasn't so good with faces but very good with names, but there's reasons. But you know what, I still agree with my past self. It is a freaking fairy tale, and fairy tales are meant to teach things. So, yeah. Most of the rest of what I said, I do actually agree with, except for, a woman using a guy to get what she wants. That's not female empowerment past me. That's just misogyny repackaged as feminism. And speaking of that, we are going to go back to this article and talk about it a little bit more. So, God, the 2010s was a bad time for feminism. And the reason that I say that is because you have women like this, and I hate to make a speculation on who they are, but I'm going to take a look real quick. Oh, yeah, no. That is a white woman. Okay. A lot of white women have this problem. A lot of white feminist women have this problem where they look at a thing and they can't see the deeper layers beyond just the surface of how they feel, feminism should look like, what strong female empowerment should look like. And most of the time, it's like the Barbie movie, which is just pink feminism, and it's just patriarchy with a bow on it. It's misogyny, it's misandry, it's all of these bad things, because they have not deconstructed, they have not decolonized in a way that would be healthy for them to understand the deeper meanings on a lot of this stuff. And in so doing, they run the risk of falling into isms that they don't realize that they are doing. And I will get to that in a second. But to get back to the article, I don't actually believe that most Disney princesses have issues in terms of female protagonists. It's just that I don't think that you have media literacy, Lauren Levine. I don't actually think that that is something that you possess. And maybe the whole media illiteracy issue that we are currently seeing started in the 2010s, with articles like this. So, for example, Snow White is an extremely well-rounded character. She has almost complete full screen time, and she is extremely kind and very generous and giving, but also, she can put her foot down as well, like the scene, where she asks the dwarves if they have washed up for supper, and they're like, oh yeah, we've totally done that, and she's like, but when? She's being extremely stern because she said what she said, and she meant it, and she wasn't going to put up with any of their white lies. And then, there's the whole being kind to strangers. Yes, she did let a stranger into her house. But sometimes I think about that scene, and then I think about 10th Kingdom. And the 10th Kingdom was like a mini-series that came out on Sci-Fi Channel, I think, in the early aughts. And there's something that Snow White says that kind of sticks with me.
I told them about my stepmother, and they became very paranoid about her. They told me never to go into town and never to open the door to strangers. Her mirrors found me eventually. She dressed as an old peddler and climbed over the 7 hills to my house. Twice she came. Once with a corset to crush my ribs, and then with a poison comb to drug me. But the last time she came, she brought the most beautiful basket of apples that I ever saw. And this time she stayed to watch me die. And to be sure, she held me in her arms until I died in front of her, choking on a piece of poison apple. And I often think, why did I let her in? Didn't I know she was bad? I did. Of course I did. But I also knew that I couldn't keep the door closed all my life, just because it was dangerous. Just because there was a chance that I might get hurt.
I think, on some level, every version of Snow White that has been put on screen, including Disney's, knows that that is her stepmother in disguise. But she lets her in anyway, and she shows her just profound kindness, because that's who Snow White is. She is an extremely giving person. So to say that she's not well-rounded in character traits beyond beauty and virtue, I mean, that's not looking at the whole picture. Like, if it was just beauty and virtue, I don't think that Snow White would get scared or would get angry or stern, because she doesn't necessarily get angry, but she definitely gets stern and firm. If she was a Mary Sue, let's say, she would just be doe-eyed and nothing would get to her, and she would just be like, and floating like a bubble through all of it. So there's that. She mentions in this article, of course, that Ever After takes a few steps in the female empowerment, and boy, time must have eroded her memory, because it's not just a few, it's a lot. Danielle borrows her sister's clothing in order to go down to where Maurice is being loaded onto a slaver ship, and she buys him back. And then she also has the courage to, essentially roll her deception with the prince and pretends to be, this lady of the court. And also has read Utopia, is, has these ideas about how society should look, and she's not afraid to voice them. She is also very strong-willed and has personality that sticks to her convictions, to her morals and ethics, you might say. And yes, while this isn't Disney, I don't think that that is a little thing. And in the 2020s, we've actually seen a lot of people who are watching Ever After for the first time and are being extremely blown away by how progressive it is for its time. Except what a lot of these people don't seem to realize is that we were actually pretty forward-thinking at one point. Before 9/11. There were things like our music and our TV shows and our cinema that were starting to progress in a way that I think it would have been very good for society. And if we had been allowed to continue, I think we would be in a much different place than what we are now. But the powers that be wanted us to not unlearn our prejudices and wanted us to continue to have isms and xenophobia. So, yeah, we could have had a good thing. But anyway, back to the article. Other remakes of the classic Disney princesses films going forward, and the things that you were hoping were going to change and become better. Girl, it is 2026, and I'm here to tell you that it is awful. The remakes are ugly, and they are being churned out so fast. We are going to be seeing a Moana remake in 2026, a film that is not even, 2 decades old, and it looks like ass, to be perfectly honest. A worn-out trend that this person has probably seen now but could not foresee back then, of just the dampest feminism, the most wet paper mache feminism that we have seen. When Jasmine has a whole song that they wrote for her about essentially female empowerment, and my voice won't be cut off, and then 2 seconds later she gets captured by Jafar's guards. Just absolute garbage nonsense. The Beauty and the Beast remake was awful. Our inanimate objects here explain the plot to Belle, so it's not a melding of the minds that happens with her and the Beast. It's literally just, well, the household objects told me about your rose and what happens, to you when the last petal falls. It's what Lindsay Ellis back in the day called a trolley problem, and while I have my opinions about Lindsay Ellis. She was 100% correct on her review of that film. It's just terrible. Um, and then, there was our remake of The Little Mermaid, which I did not see. The discourse around that was awful because there was a lot of racism because they cast a black woman to play Ariel. My argument with that film is that that woman is so beautiful and she deserved a better looking film. Just, it's just so washed out and bland, and it's very beige mom, these remakes. Um, the Mulan remake was also a disaster. I think because they did a lot more just stupid decisions with the film itself. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Mulan, now with more magic. The Lion King, which they did with fully CGI. They just redid the whole film in CGI, and they cast Beyonce as Nala and added some scenes in there for, the female empowerment, the lioness, the whole it's just, it's a mess. And I know that there's another one in my brain right now that's totally escaping me for a remake that they just did that was not very well received, because as these get churned out more and more and more, we are seeing what they are doing to the princesses in the writing room is just butchering their characters beyond belief. Oh, and I just remembered what it was, the Snow White remake. How could I forget the disaster around that? The two big things that I will say about that film are, one, I do think that the lead actress is insufferable. I do think she's a spoiled brat in terms of, she's only been working in Hollywood for a little bit, and she's already demanding that she gets, a pay raise. Now, I don't actually think that actors should be getting paid what they get paid anyway, because if the pay that you make can thrust you into billionaire or millionaire status, you do not need to be paid that much money. We do not need more of that, and that's another reason why a lot of these actors are tone deaf, to the atrocities that are currently happening in our country, because they don't get it. And their money, they can't hear a damn thing. So no, you shouldn't be getting paid more. You should be getting paid a livable wage, but not the money that I think she feels that she is owed. Like, why do you want so much of a cut of a pie when, people that actively work for Disney proper can't even make a decent wage? The other part of it is, the lead actress said that she was pro-Palestine and, X, Y, and Z. And Gal Gadot is Israeli and worked in the IDF at one point. And my morals and ethics, I had someone say to me about this, they were like, if you were getting a paycheck, you would do it. And I'm like, no amount of money could make me actively work with a known Zionist. And I'm sorry, that's just me. If she actually cared about Palestine, she would have dropped the project immediately, especially because the ties that Disney has to big shareholders, and specifically has, donated money to sketchy organizations, it's not a good look. And that was known back when she was filming and, getting ready to put this film out. She didn't drop the project. She didn't do any of that. She can say Free Palestine all day long, but at the end of the day, you're working with a company that directly gives money that makes people bleed. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Contract or no, I don't care. Stand for something. But that's not what it's about. It's about the money, and we all know it. But I digress. I'm getting back to the article here. I still stand by what I said in my original article, or, rant here. I still stand by what I said during my rant, which is forest creatures are not supernatural. I think that the forest animals being around these women is a sign of their kindness. Animals trust them. And fairy godmothers are people. Just because you put fairy in the front of something, it makes people go, oh, well, they have to be a magical creature. And it's like, that is true. But to bring up Ever After, for example, Leonardo da Vinci in that film is technically Danielle's fairy godmother. So it's all about how you look at it. Yes, we saw Cinderella's fairy godmother appear in a cluster of sparkles, but it's also possible that she could have just been an ancestor that had come to help her out. If you want to tie it to real world things. Supernatural, maybe a little supernatural adjacent, but it doesn't mean anything. Like, if you watched Frozen, they technically, quote-unquote, did give her someone to talk to, but, Elsa couldn't be bothered to build a snowman with her sister, so I don't know what to tell you. Again, it's so weird to me that, there's this whole, oh, well, Prince Charming is supposedly head over heels in love with Cinderella. Like, why does he need a shoe to do that? Okay, first of all, it's a fairy tale. 1. You're thinking about it way too hard. And also, we don't know the time frame between her putting on that glass slipper and them getting married. You assume that it's the very next day because, this is like, what, a 90-minute kids animated film. So, we have to speed time up a bit, but you don't actually know how much time they spent together before getting married. Cinderella does seem like the type of character that would put boundaries on that. Would be like, hey, like, I know we danced together, and even while they're walking around the castle, that we do see that scene of them dancing, and then they pause and they cross the bridge and they look into the water, and then they go to the pond, and Cinderella, dips her hand in the water. And I kind of always read that scene, even though there is singing in the background and it's clear that they're falling in love, I really do think that they're talking to each other that entire time. Just because we don't hear the dialogue doesn't mean that it is not happening. I'm sort of sick to death of people just kind of having to have everything spoon-fed to them. Like, oh, they're not talking, they're just singing. That means that nothing is going on. She's just like falling in love with a strange man. You don't know that that's what's happening. And again, when I was younger, I kind of got the sense that they were talking to each other. It was just the leisurely way that they were walking around, and it just kind of felt like that. Yes, dancing, but also. So you don't know that it was the very next day they got married. Maybe it was a couple of months. Maybe it was a whole year. You don't know. You just assume. And again, the ball gown is magic. It's fairy magic. So there's a glamour on that. Maybe it would be difficult to be recognized. And if you notice, Lady Tremaine said that there was something familiar about her, but that she couldn't put her finger on it, whereas the stepsisters didn't recognize her at all. And in the original fairy tale, that's actually said. It's like she meets her stepsisters at the ball, and she's so gracious and kind to them, and they're just like, oh my god, what a beautiful princess, because they think she's some foreign, debutante. But that's not the case, and I do believe that that is very magic and glamour. Um, this whole no one acknowledges Cinderella as someone worthy of the prince until the cinders are washed from her face and she's dressed in a gorgeous gown. Where are you getting this? Like, no one ever said that, ever. That feels like projection to me, Like, no one is going to acknowledge that. No, I think that's just you, bestie. I think you're the only one that feels that way. And this tired rhetoric that kept on happening in the 2010s of Ariel has to give up her voice and her mermaidhood to finally meet up with Eric. Okay. So, first of all, the losing her voice was not something that Ariel had foreseen. She didn't know anything about Ursula except that she was a sea witch and that she was dangerous. But she still went through with it anyway, but that's because she's 16 years old. And giving up her mermaidhood, she, I think, kind of already knew. Ursula explains it to her, but she's kind of like, okay, But I do think that within these fairy tales, we are kind of forgetting something very vital. Now, my friend Melissa said to me several years ago, she said, there's only like 7 different stories that we as people, as humans, tell each other. It's just, what way are we telling each other? How is it different? And I think that a lot of these fairy tales are the Demeter and Persephone story, or the ode to Demeter, where Demeter literally has to give up her daughter to the underworld. And that story was written for mothers who, had to give up their daughters into marriage to men that lived extremely far away and they were never going to see them again. Like, that's why it's called the Ode to Demeter. It's less about Persephone and it's more about her. And I do think that there was a little bit of that in The Little Mermaid. She has to give something up in order to grow up, in order to make decisions for herself, in order to have that coming of age moment. And a lot of times that coming of age comes with sacrifices. And sometimes that means that you have to leave your family and you'll never see them again, which kind of happens with Ariel, but it kind of doesn't at the same time. But, also Triton has that ode to Demeter a little bit. He has to give his daughter up. It's a whole thing. And this part down in here is where she shows her ism. And it's with the end, does Prince Eric really want his love to be mute and unable to see her family? Like I just said, for the family part, that's the whole part of growing up, is sometimes you let go of your family. And in Ariel's case, quite literally, she is a world apart. So yeah, she won't be able to see her family as often as she would like. I feel like saying, does Prince Eric really want his love to be mute, is kind of ableist, if I'm being so honest. I don't think it should have mattered whether Ariel retained her voice or not. If she had continued to be mute, I still think that Eric would have loved her because he was already falling in love with her to begin with before Ursula did what Ursula do as a villain, you know? And Grimsby even tells him, you know, far better than any dream girl, there's one that's one of flesh and blood, warm and caring and right before your eyes. And Eric makes a conscious decision in that moment to give up looking for, well, Ariel. He doesn't know that it's her, and decides that he is going to ask this girl to marry him, whether or not she's mute. So, yeah, that's ableist. He was going to choose her regardless of her disability. Period. Little asinine to say that, if I'm being completely honest. And this part is completely incorrect. Jasmine only meets Aladdin thanks to the help of a genie sprung from a magic lamp. That is profoundly untrue. Like, girl, did you even watch any of these movies? Because Jasmine runs away from the palace because she wants freedom. She meets Aladdin in the marketplace. The genie has not factored into this at all. And in the few moments that they are hanging out together, they figure out that they have a lot in common, which is exactly what this author is asking for. It's like, you know, can they have someone to talk to, relate to, all this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, she had Aladdin. She found Aladdin and they started chatting and realized that they were along the same lines. And then, you know, they were going to do what, again, young adults do, and they were going to go in for a kiss, you know, because the feelings were there already. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you meet people and things just click. So that's it's stupid, if I can be honest for a second. I just think that that's really dumb. Like, the genie wasn't even there. What do you mean? I don't think you watched the film, period. I find it really interesting that Kenneth Branagh is, or did, I should say, direct that film. Hot take, I don't actually think that men should be directing films that are being pitched as feminist. Feminism is for everyone. Feminism is for men as well as women because it's about equality. But Hollywood does not actually understand what that means. So, for Hollywood specifically, I'm going to say that truthfully, none of the genders can actually direct because they're not good at it. Because the men are not female presenting types with the wealth of the female experience behind them to write a film about women for women. And any of the female directors that I've seen, specifically the one who wrote the Barbie films, have not unpacked their misogyny or their patriarchy. They haven't decolonized. So they trumpet feminism, you know. Oh, look, we're doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing so good. When in actuality, you're just repackaging the patriarchy and slapping some pink paint on it. It's just ridiculous. So at this point in Hollywood, which is another industry built on capitalism and lies, no one can direct anything. You should probably just leave it up to the queers and call it a day, man. It's kind of annoying that Kenneth Branagh back in 2014 was telling E basically the same PR rhetoric. Is that what this is? That's kind of what this feels like, you know? It's like, oh, we're giving it a contemporary feel. And also, you know, it's not built around the idea that Cinderella's life depends on finding a man or things. That's almost verbatim what the actress who played the live action Snow White said. You know, like, it wasn't about finding a man, or it wasn't about, you know, X, Y, and Z. It was about her kingdom that her father has left to her, even though that's not how Cinderella, sorry, that's not how Snow White's story goes. Anyway, so yeah, I think this is PR that they feed them and that they have to regurgitate every single time that they do something quote unquote feminist. So, oh God, give me independent artists and creators that are doing worthwhile films and other forms of media, because I know they're out there. Thank you for staying with me for this particular little episode. Yeah, I guess my closing thoughts for this were the 2010s were just a terrible, terrible time for media analysis. Might have actually started the media illiteracy issue that we see today, and white feminists just making all of these ridiculous accusations to the classic Disney princesses. I really wish it would stop. I didn't realize back then that it was going to continue to be a thing up until now, but it still is, and it still bothers me. And I really feel that articles like this that actually perpetuate misinformation about the actual Disney films is very much the same. You know, now we have a lot of younger people coming up, you know, just turning 30 and stuff like that, and they regurgitate this kind of stuff. All the stuff that they heard when they were like kids, it's all coming out of their mouths now. And now it's up to people that are slightly older, or were actually, you know, their age and paid attention, to correct them and actually bring the real information to light. It's honestly a lot. So thanks, Lauren DeLynn. You made this a lot harder than it really needed to be. But anyway, guys, I am fading. So that is it for this episode. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Hello. If you would like to support me monetarily, I do have a Ko-fi and a Patreon. And I'm not going to give any secrets away as to what goes on either of those. You just have to click the links and take a look for yourself. So anyway, guys, again, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you all in the next one. Good night.